Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Hollywood Breaks. This week, I'm joined by a special guest co-host, Robin Geisen, as Tim Thompson's on vacation. And finally, we talk about Top Gun Maverick. It's here. After 2.5 years of waiting, it's here. And we couldn't be more excited about it. And we talk a little bit about the campaign and the great work that Paramount did opening this movie and its prospects for this weekend. And then we dive a little bit more into the Founders Brew newsletter and talk a little bit about Kareem Daniel and David Zaslav and what they mean for the industry and its future. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Hollywood Breaks. All right, so yeah, Top Gun Maverick. Excited it's finally here. Woohoo!
I'm so excited.
2 years of waiting?
Top Gun is one of the best movies of all time. So, it has big expectations going into it. And from what I hear, I have not seen it yet, but it delivers. So I can't wait.
Yeah, I have it on good authority that it delivers and on all cylinders. So I haven't bought my tickets yet. So please don't harass me, dear viewers, with your castigating comments about how I don't go to the movies anymore. But I have not bought my tickets yet, but I am going to see it hopefully next week. Robin, are you going to see it this weekend? You said you were going to.
We have
and then until your plans change.
Yeah, we have tickets for tonight in San Diego. Yeah. But my sister-in-law just called us and told us that she has COVID. So we're no longer going to San Diego, which means we also no longer have a babysitter for our children. So,
you can make it work.
Working against
Do some magic. Do some magic. Work some magic in LA, right?
Actually, can we use this podcast to ask for a babysitter for me tonight? I need a babysitter.
Sure.
A 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. They'll be asleep already. I'll go to a late showing. Just come and hang out on my couch.
You might want to do a background check, and rather than, I'm sure our listeners and viewers are top-notch individuals, but you never know. The internet can be a crazy place these days.
I know, it's true. It's true.
So what do you think of number-wise? What are the soothsayers that you hang out with out there in Los Angeles saying we're looking at as far as box office goes?
I mean, people
Is this the official return of the movies? Could
yes.
this be it?
Yes.
Part 5?
Look, I think this is, again, it's not, I think that all the movies that have come out, like arguably Spider-Man was the return, right? Like, or Doctor Strange, like people are coming out for events, and this is an event. And, the thing that will be interesting to see is who the audience composition is. I actually, all the people who have withheld going from the movies tend to be that older audience, right? Who's a little bit more nervous about COVID, but also that's kind of the core for this franchise, being that it's an over 30-year-old, film, or sequel, I guess. But it is, I think people are going to come out. I think this is an event. I think easily it's going to be Tom Cruise's best opening ever. And easily. And which is surprising when I went back and looked at the numbers. Like his biggest opening was in the 60s, which is crazy to me. Like to me, like when I think movie star, the first name that comes to my mind, just because I'm old, is Tom Cruise, right? Like,
right.
But he's the epitome of the movie star, right?
Right.
Because he gets it. He just gets it. And by the way, I think that is going to be further cemented this weekend. I mean, previews last night were over 19 million. Like, that's the highest in Paramount history for previews and Memorial Day weekend. Like, it's going to, people were saying over 100 for the 3-day, which I think that's a very safe bet now, especially.
I think that's a very safe bet.
Last night.
Yes.
And I also think it very much bodes well for this movie, because when you think about who that core audience is too, they're not always coming out on opening weekend. They tend to wait and come to the movie. So I think this is going to run, and it's going to play and play and play. Kudos to Mark Weinstock, amazing campaign, and kudos to Chris Aronson for sticking to this distribution strategy. And I mean, they're geniuses over there. And I'm biased because I know them and have worked with them both. But I'm better.
Thank you for clarifying your bias.
But I'm better because of it, because of working with them.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm happy for my friends.
Yeah, I agree, and I applaud their campaign. I as I remarked in my newsletter this week, it was quite impressive to finally see an old school, big budget, summer movie campaign again. Like I don't feel like we've seen these. And I would argue, to your earlier point about why I think this could potentially mean a sort of softening and a more excitement about a return to movies, is it's not a superhero movie.
Yeah.
What we've seen over the course of the last 2 years is the movies that really drive people to the theaters now are superhero movies. Those are the ones that have all had the big openings. There have been middling opens here and there, like Sonic, which was based on a video game, but could arguably kind of fall into that same rubric of superhero comic book video game. And there was Scream, obviously, which did somewhat okay, but that was like a reboot. So, I mean, this is the continuation of a movie that was released, 30 plus years ago, I think.
Yeah.
And to your point, I think the fact that the audience is running as on the older side, because I think this is more of a nostalgia play, obviously. And, it will be interesting to see if I think it will, to your point, do well. I'm going to take the over. I think it's probably going to do around 125 if I had to guess.
Yeah.
Just because it feels like it has momentum. It's everywhere. And again, to your point earlier, that's a credit to Mark and his team. They just built this campaign, and it seems to be the only movie they're working on. And you and I have experience with that when we worked on Avatar. It was the only movie we worked on for 3 straight months. Yeah. And I get the sense that's kind of what Paramount has done here, where they just kind of cleared the skids a little bit and said, okay, we have to focus on this movie 100%. It's all about this movie. And it had from what I read, a very impressive P&A spend. So I think it's great to see that coming back. And I'm hoping this means that, this will continue on through the summer. We have some other movies coming out this weekend. But I think this is definitely going to be the one that swallows all, Bob's Burgers coming out from 20th Century Studios, which I think is just going to be a blip. It's funny. I heard a radio spot today and my wife says, doesn't tell me anything about the movie. And I'm like, Sarah, this is not a movie this is not a movie that's going to drive a broad audience. They know who their audience is, and they're just reminding them, hey, this is coming out this weekend. Other than that Top Gun thing. So you should probably check out this movie. So
yeah. Look, I think Top Gun The Edge too is it's in the widest theater count ever in history, right? Like so it's and there's nothing really else out there for people to go see that they haven't seen already. So in a way, COVID has done it a favor in clearing the release schedule for them. Yeah. And them sticking to that release date was genius. And pushing it out for 2 years, I think also, to fight for that theatrical release, I think was really smart, and it's going to pay off for them this weekend. I really do think that. Look, anything over 100 is a giant win for them, and they're going to do that, I think, easily. Right. So, I'm with you. I'm taking the over. I will say, like, I was watching This Is Us because I'm a sappy girl and I love that show. And it's amazing. And I just enjoy sitting there and crying for an hour. It's kind of sad. I don't know what that says about
Dan
me.
Fogelman is good at getting you to cry. That's his one pure strength. He can get everybody to cry at any point in time.
It's so good. But even in there, and look, everybody, by the way, was buying spots in that, which also to media strategy still, people are still watching TV and still enjoying This Is Us. But the spot I saw for Top Gun that was so genius. It was like a 15-second spot. It was so fast, and it was a review spot. And I mean, when they have 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, they obviously have their pick of the litter of whatever they want to use for reviews. But I wrote down some of the things, and it was like, what was it? Profound cinematic experience. Well, actually, the very first thing that I noticed was it's genius. Like, as soon as it comes on, the first word is Maverick, right? Like, everyone knows who Maverick is. So it's immediately grabs your attention. And all it is what happens to you if you go through with this. And he says, I know what happens to everyone else if I don't. And that's it. That's like the only line from the movie that they show. And then it's just like, a montage of all these amazing shots, whether it's Tom Cruise on his bike racing against the jet in the sunset in the background. And then the guys on the beach playing with a ball, reminiscent of the very first one, playing volleyball.
Yes, love.
All I hear is playing with the boys, right? Like, I'm so happy. like I'm hearing Danger Zone, I hear Playing with the Boys, like it's all there. And then up against it are these flashes of, I wrote it down, masterful, next one, heart-stopping, next one, breathtaking, next one, spectacular, and the very last one ends, or no, What a Ride from Sharon Waxman, the rap, like, and then the last one, seriously, says, they have this quote, which is even amazing in itself, one of the greatest movies ever made. Like, I don't know what better review, like, quote you can get than that.
Right.
And
all right, well,
it was brilliant.
Okay. I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate on this one. Does that really work anymore? Because I'm going to pretend. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play. My wife does this to me all the time because after years of me living and working at Fox and working in the industry, she gets tired when we're watching a show and I stop it to go back and watch the TV spot.
Yeah.
And I go through it. And like, to me, I think those kinds of spots are just sort of a way to almost placate talent in some regard, because that's a tried and true formula. But whether or not it actually works, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that somebody saw that movie, that spot. No, I want you to counter me, because that's what I want. So give me a second. Finish what I'm going to say. I'm not entirely sure that is going to convince someone to buy a ticket, because to your point about quotes, yes, they have their pick, which is amazing. But you can also go to a critic and say, hey, can we say this? Because you kind of inferred it in your article. And the critic will be, oh, yeah, sure, that's fine. I mean, I would love to see the attribute who said best movie ever, because I'm sure it's, so-and-so at, did you get the attribute?
It was at Geek Tech.
Of course. Some guy probably saw it. Yeah. So, all right. Again, I'm a little on the fence on this one, but my wife would say that doesn't convince anyone to see the movie. And I'm like, okay, so pretend you have to make the argument to my wife of why that's an effective spot.
Okay.
Now, this might open a bigger can of worms, but go ahead.
No, it's not. This is actually, I think, a very easy answer for me.
Okay.
It works when the movie works. When the movie delivers, like this one does. And it doesn't work in a vacuum by itself. It works when it's an anchor to the campaign that they just delivered. That's what works. And because all it does is reiterate what you said earlier, I can't look anywhere without seeing Top Gun everywhere I look. I hear from everyone. It's a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is 19 million in previews. Like, you're hearing it from every angle. So then you're watching a TV spot and it's a 15-second spot of, Maverick, and with every single shot that you love and remember, it's reminiscent of the original movie. It's a genius spot because it is a genius spot because psychologically it brings you back to Top Gun, but it shows you all new footage, right? And it's just like, to me, that was the nail in the coffin for them. And you know what? Does it work? We'll see this weekend.
Yes. Okay. Fair enough. I will give you that. And, now that I think about it, the fact that, because the argument against it would be that, well, people fast forward to that stuff anyway, but you're still going to see the words pop up. So that in itself, I haven't seen the spot, but I imagine the words take up the whole screen. And it's like, so if you're fast forwarding, you're just going to see the words hard stopping, blah, 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 blah.
Also, I will argue this on a regular show, on a regular night for that show, I would say, yes, they do fast forward. But when it's This Is Us in their last 2 to 3 episodes ever, their series finale, people are watching it live. They're like, that is live viewing for the core audience of This Is Us. So they are, I think, watching it in real time. Right.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you're right. We'll see how. I mean, I think the campaign has been great. They've really just been hammering it on all sides. You see it everywhere you go. So I think, and that's sort of the point of a big summer blockbuster type campaign. And so again, kudos to Mark Weinstock and, as you said, Chris Aronson. I wonder though, in my mind, I'm also wondering if Tom Cruise hadn't been so adamant about keeping it in theaters, whether or not they would have broke and released it on the streamer. But we'll never know.
Well, once again, Tom proves why he's Tom Cruise. He was right to do that. And good for him. Good for every single person who fought to do this, because that's not only just fighting for that movie, that's fighting for movie going. That isn't the superhero movie going. Like, this is gonna prove, not that we need to prove it, because I actually have always been in the camp of like, movies aren't over, you just have to be an event. But this is going to show that you don't have to be a superhero movie just to succeed. Like, you have to deliver a good movie under a reasonable budget for which you made it, right? Yep. And you have to be an event of some sort for somebody. If you're not an event for someone, then you're an event for no one.
For no one, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, okay.
We say that all the time, the Tony Sella special. And he's right. He's right. And that's where I think they're going to prove it. Now, you and I had discussed this before. We were talking about the competition that it's going to face this weekend, specifically for, a lot of crossover audiences for both of these other big projects, not Bob's Burger, but Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Dropped 7 episodes.
Awash in 80s nostalgia. So.
Which I'm completely fine with, by the way. And then Obi-Wan Kenobi's dropping 2 episodes. So Keith, what do you think is gonna, what do you think that's gonna do for the box office?
It's funny because when we had Cammie Sargent on a few weeks ago, we talked a little bit about this, because Cammie actually brought this up when she was working on, I think it was called City of Gold, the Sandra Bullock.
The Lost City.
Lost City, thank you. She had a concern that Bridgerton was dropping the same weekend, that it's very much a crossover audience.
Yeah.
And if you look at the weekend, that obviously wasn't a factor. But I think the one X factor with regards to that, now I don't know if Bridgerton released all their episodes at once or whether or not they do a weekly. I don't watch Bridgerton, so I don't know. But I know that Stranger Things did dump all 7 episodes. And as you said, Obi-Wan has 2 episodes. Now, I imagine most of the people who are doing this have kids, much like you and I, who are nostalgic for Top Gun. So it will, and this is a Memorial Day weekend, and it's a Memorial Day weekend for the first time in a long time where COVID's still a factor, but for most people, COVID's over, and it's just something that's there that they just have to be aware of. And so there's a lot of competing factors. I don't necessarily think it's gonna. I don't think it's gonna be. I don't think it's gonna affect the box office overall, because I feel like there's gonna be that pull of sort of like, I want to see this on the big screen almost, because it has those. You see some of those shots in the spots, and you're like, wow, I need to see that in the big screen, because that is not going to comport on a small screen. And Stranger Things has been a little uneven. I don't watch it, but from what I've read and people I've talked to, the last few seasons have been a little rocky. So there's that. And then Obi-Wan Kenobi, well, yeah, it's great, but it's not going anywhere. It's good. They're going to release 2 episodes. It's going to be there. Top Gun's not going to be in theaters forever. So I think when people start to weigh their value propositions, they're going to be like, you know what? Top Gun's going to be there. Stranger Things is going to be there forever. And, I don't really have as much FOMO about Stranger Things as I do about seeing Top Gun in the theater. So I think Top Gun's going to win out on that bet, if I had to wager a guess.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said Stranger Things and Obi-Wan aren't going anywhere. Like,
right.
They're not. I think what we've learned throughout COVID is people have started to get used to, I think they've started to be comfortable in this world that we're living in now, in entertainment consumption. And they've kind of figured out a rhythm for themselves, right? Of whether it's like, we'll watch 1 episode on Monday or Tuesday or, whatever. I think people kind of have gotten in that little rhythm for themselves. Now, Top Gun, it's going to be in theaters for, a while, but what isn't going to be there is the audience on opening weekend all together. This is a movie that I think it's going to be, I think people aren't even thinking this, but subconsciously they are, which is I want to be part of this opening, right? Like I want to be there to experience the love for this now franchise, right? Like, and I think that that's going to be part of it, and that's going to play into it. There's urgency. They have done what every studio tries to do with every marketing campaign. They have done it. They have created urgency for Top Gun, and I think that's gonna deliver for them, and that's gonna end up taking out Stranger Things. Not taking out, everyone's gonna watch Stranger Things and everyone's gonna watch Obi-Wan, but they're just gonna do it on their own time. Or they'll go to an early showing of Top Gun and then they'll come home and release The Babysitter and stay awake and watch an episode of Obi-Wan, right? Like
that's what I'm planning on doing.
Like people are gonna figure it out. And I don't think there's gonna be an urgency there as much for Stranger Things and as much for Obi-Wan, because what you said too, it's been a long time and people want to get out this weekend. People want to just experience events again. And this is that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think this is an opportunity that I think nobody really wants to miss. And I think they're going to do very well this weekend. So again, congrats to Paramount and everybody over there for a rock star campaign. As I said in my newsletter, it's great to have balls to the wall marketing back again, because I've missed it over the last couple of years.
It is.
But it's another thing that you brought up that I think is very interesting. You talk a lot about the shifting consumption habits of moviegoers and consumers in general. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, it seems that people are, particularly in Hollywood, are excited about this because it's not a superhero movie, and does this mean movies are really back? And it got me thinking a lot about some of the changes that are occurring in Hollywood right now. And we talked a lot last week in last week's episode about Kareem Daniel, the now head of Disney's media and entertainment distribution division. And then there was a piece this past week about David Zaslav, the new CEO of WarnerBrosDiscovery. And what struck me about both of those, and I covered this a little bit in my newsletter too, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts as well. So for Kareem, it seems like the idea of taking away the P&L and basically the overall distribution strategy away from sort of the content creators is unprecedented in Hollywood, in my mind. Like the fact that the head of distribution for Disney Studios reports to Kareem and not to Alan Bergman, that's like a whole new sea change. And the fact that he's not a creative, but he's able to take a sort of unromantic look at the data and determine where the movie is best served, versus just saying, someone like who has a background like Alan Bergman would probably say, I want this to be in theaters. Like, there's no doubt. Whereas Kareem could say, oh yeah, well, look at the numbers. This says this kind of movie is going to do better on streaming. And then you shift to the article about David, and what I thought was great about because obviously it was a source piece, Ari Emanuel spoke, and there was a lot of information. So David, I think, was probably involved in the crafting of this article. It said, he said when he was talking about the latest Clint Eastwood movie, and he said to the executives, why did you make this movie? And they said, well, he's made a lot of good films for us. And he's like, well, we're not doing that anymore because this doesn't make any sense. And there are movies I've worked on, I will not say which, where that was very much the argument for the reason the movie was made, was because, well, we've done this before with this guy's given us good movies, or this gal's given us good movies. So now we need to sort of quote unquote repay the favor, even though everyone probably knows. I mean, you've been in those meetings when you're sitting there and everyone knows the movie's going to tank, but because of who's behind it, and you don't want to sour that relationship, and nobody wants to have that awkward conversation.
Right.
It's just, okay, we're just going to keep dumping money at this and try to save it. So, I mean, I think these are all, and there was another part of the article where David said, like, and he literally sent us the entire company. We're going to start investing in data and have a better sense of what's going to work. And this again, and this is another point that I hammer over and over again, that Kevin Getz mentioned on it when we had him on as a guest. It's like, there's a way to be a smart filmmaker and a smart studio. And a lot of studios don't want to have that conversation. They just want to make what they want to make because they've dreamed of making this movie since they were a wee toddler or whatever, when they were back wherever they were from and watching it in the theater. Like, I want to make a sequel to that. And arguably, you could say that was probably what happened with Top Gun. A lot of people that worked at Paramount always dreamed they wanted to work at Paramount because that's where Top Gun came from. But the flip side of that argument would be, well, Paramount was very smart about what they spent. They didn't go nuts. They were very rational in terms of how they spent, and they delayed it 2 years to ensure that they get maximum box office. All very difficult decisions, but they made the right ones. So I'm wondering, and I posit that this may be a sea change that's happening. I argue it's not necessarily enough. And we've been down this road before where we get people who show up and say, I'm gonna change the world, basically. And this is I'm the new chief. And now, to be fair to David, he does have a track record of success in terms of turning companies around. He did it with Discovery. Some would say that he damaged the brand a little bit by turning it into a giant reality TV house versus a educational channel. But again, it's show business, not show friends. And he made money for the stockholders and he made money for the company. And that's what his charge is. And they're sitting there with $55 billion worth of debt after this merger. So he has to save money. And the same thing with, Kareem's and Disney. They're looking at Disney Plus being like this giant, potential streamer that could take down Netflix. And there's only so many Marvel, Lucasfilm movies and Disney characters, animated movies you can remake. So you got to maximize as much as possible. So I would be curious, what do you think? Do you think this is just is this going to mark a major shift, or are we sort of is this just a blip until everything snaps back to the way it's always been?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think to talk about each one of them, look, let's talk about both of them, Kareem and Zaslav. Like, I think they're both, look, I think they're all doing the right things. I agree with their decisions. I agree with not making Cry Macho for that amount of money. I agree with that. Yeah. He's right. When he said, what was it? It's show business, not show friends.
Not show friends, right? Yep.
He's right. And here's the thing. What we need to say to filmmakers and what we need to be brave to do, and what I think he is doing, and I appreciate it because it needs to be done across every distribution outlet, every studio and every creative content distributor, which is, I'm not saying let's not make your movie that you want, that you're passionate about. I'm saying I'm only going to make it for this amount, right? And because this is where the upside is. That's the conversation that we need to have. Like, I'm not saying let's not do it. I'm saying let's do it smart, right? So those are conversations that should be had. That's where marketing should be part of each and every single decision that is made as it relates to what movies we decide to make, right?
Right.
And so I love that he's doing that. I love that he's calling them out and saying that. I think he was brilliant to pull the plug on CNN Plus. Like, people aren't going to pay for their news. Like, I don't, and the thing is they're calling it content, but I don't know that people want their news to be content. I think people just want the news, so it's also, there was a disconnect there. And I think he was right to pull the plug on that. I think both of them are making smart decisions. I mean, look, Kareem is kind of this, everyone, if the worst thing that they can say about you is that you're understated and you're this like mystery man, right? Is what they're saying.
You're already winning.
I don't think that's a bad thing. But having said that, like, what he does need to do, I appreciate a man who can put his head down, or a woman, like a person who can just put their head down and do the work, right? Like, that's my kind of person. Those are the people I like to work with because they're there for the right reasons and they're just getting stuff done, right? He's just doing the job. However, when you're in that position at a very high level, the thing that he does need to do that he hasn't done yet that I think would benefit Kareem is he can't let it get too far to where others control his narrative, because then it gets out of control And look, he's in a good position where he's the right-hand man and everybody trusts him. But like what I see Kareem doing from afar is like, and I don't know Kareem, I've never worked with him, but just from what I'm seeing and the decisions that are getting made and just coming at it from an outside perspective is like, it sounds to me like he's getting the job done. It sounds to me like he's trusting all of his people to make those decisions. It sounds to me like he's not a micromanager. Like all of these things are good, right? Like these are good things. He trusts his team. And by the way, he's making the right decisions, you know, turning red and Luca, like I remember talking about Luca before. Now, like, I think that those were both the right decisions to not go theatrical from the start. I do think with Luca, they could have come in. I've said this before on the podcast, where I think that like once they saw that there was an audience there, and there wasn't anybody in theaters, like in order to get people to go to theaters, they could have experimented with that once they got the groundswell. But initially, that's a hard movie to sell, right? Like when you think of the content of what you're selling, of like what Luca was about. It's about two sea monsters. They're not cute, right? Like you're not getting minions. Like you're not getting the kids being like, oh, they're minions. They're so cute. They're kind of ugly little sea monsters. And you can't relate because the whole reason they want to be people is so they can go ride a Vespa. Like there's no stakes. There's not much to sell there. Now the movie's wonderful, but from a marketing standpoint, you know, in a 2-minute trailer, that's a tough sell.
A tough message. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough sell. After the fact, I think that they could have played with it a little bit in theaters. Now, Turning Red is a movie that I think was brilliant. I know a lot of people were like, why aren't they putting that on, you know, big screens? But it's because the movie was for a more mature kid.
Yeah.
And it's all about kind of puberty and like coming of age in a way that like, that's also a tough sell, right? Like,
yes.
I don't want to take my 4-year-old to go see that movie because I don't want to answer those questions yet. You know, like, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready to talk about periods with her.
Yeah.
Like, and that's a big part of that movie. And it's important for the audience it's made for. But you know, I think it was smart to release it because it also protected the property. So while it may upset other people, I think in the long run, it was the right choice. I think they're both doing the right things. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, I it's interesting. I never really thought about that, but it seems like there was definitely a conversation with marketing about how to position those movies. Because you're right. The one thing that I always found so difficult about our jobs is we were always asked after the fact of like, all right, now you got to sell it. How are you going to sell this? And I'm like, oh, I have no idea. And I always felt like we were always saving the movie from itself in a lot of ways. And that's just not our job.
They bring us in as the firefighter after the house has already burned down.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
You know, like and that's a broken process. And so I think it's smart to approach it the way that they're both doing. I think, you know, look, I think they're both showing that they're making right decisions. So far, so good. Nobody bats 1,000, right? But so far, I think they're both doing some good things. And like, that's the one thing with Kareem is like, what he should be careful with is making sure that others don't control his narrative because that could get out of control for him.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. I think that's a really, really good point because he is kind of letting the narrative kind of slip away from him a little bit and letting other people speak on his behalf.
Yes.
Which is not necessarily a smart move. I get he wants to be understated. He didn't grow up in he didn't start in the industry. He started at Goldman Sachs and then he eventually migrated over to Disney and, you know, became Chapek's number 2, which is great. But in a town like that, where it's so small and insular and it's so relationship based, you really do have to work to control your narrative, especially when you're in a high profile position like that. And I think he's going to have to really work. I mean, it's interesting because you contrast the two pieces. Like you look at the Kareem Daniel piece, which is very much sourced from people who otherwise had dealt with Kareem in sort of a tangential way. And then obviously the Wall Street Journal piece was very sourced. And obviously Zaslav probably signed off on it because you got Ari Emanuel talking about him. You got all these other, you know, direct access to things he said at meetings. Like, so clearly there it was like, yeah, we got to do, and that's smart. And Zaslav is a smart guy, and he clearly knows I got to control the narrative on this because we all know in a couple of weeks there's going to be massive layoffs because again he's got to deliver on the savings that he promised to all the investors, and layoffs are going to be a part of that.
Yeah.
But I think he's trying to get ahead of that narrative by saying, you know what, that's only one part of it. Yes, there are going to have to be cuts, but look, you know, we killed CNN Plus. We're redoing TBS Turner networks. They're not going to be making any new shows anymore. They're just basically going to be like outlets for sports and second run movies. And then, you know, and then Warner Bros., we're not going to be making terrible decisions anymore. And you know what? I'm going to reach out to J.K. Rowling and say, hey, let's create a Harry Potter universe, which to me is like a duh, but
seems like a good idea.
It seems like a good idea. Like, why not reach out to her? Yeah. So, you know, I think there's definitely, you're right. There's the two pieces were so different. And Zaslav has made a concerted effort to show that, you know, I'm going to control the narrative a little bit, whereas Kareem is sort of like, I'm just going to sit back and not talk about myself, which I can understand the impulse, especially if you're more introverted and you like to, like you said, the great thing about
matter, right? Like it doesn't matter.
Right.
But unfortunately, in our business, it kind of does sometimes.
It kind of does, yes.
Because
and I mean, I agree with you. It's great to work with people who just want to sit down and like work and don't get caught up in the trappings of the business and just really like, you know, I always refer to Mark Platt's quote when he was being interviewed in Variety, and he's, you know, the interviewer was commenting how he had pictures of his family behind him, not like movie posters. And he said, well, you know what? This is what I do. It's not who I am. And there are so many people who just get wrapped up in this, like, oh, this is who I am. This is all me. The industry is everything about, I live and eat, sleep and breathe this. And clearly Kareem is trying to maintain that sort of, this is just my job. Right. But when you have a high profile job like that you have to kind of walk a line a little bit. And I think, you know, we'll see how it goes, but I'm optimistic that they are, as you said, making some really smart moves.
I don't think I need Kareem to go out and be as extroverted as Zaslav either. I'm not asking for him to be that, but at some point, he is going to have to be front and center throughout certain moments, right?
Yeah.
And he can pick and choose what those moments are, and he should. But I think it's wonderful that he trusts his team to do all these things, and he's just the guy from the background, and he has a good perspective, and he's not the kind of guy who pats himself on the back. I don't even need him to pat himself on the back. I just do. He needs to be. We need to hear his voice, right? And in some way. Otherwise, the press and press does what press does, and they're
especially Hollywood press.
Yeah, they're gonna
love gossip.
They're going to control that for him, and that can be dangerous because it also might not necessarily even be true. And that's where he really needs to just make sure he takes the reins to protect his team too. He's going to have to do that. When you're in that role at that high profile, you're going to have to do some sort of leadership. You have to take it on in some way. And however he chooses to do that is great, but he just needs to hold on to his own narrative. That's what I think he needs to do.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the next few weeks bring and months and whatnot. Well, Robin, listen, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate you stepping in for Mr. Tim Thompson, who is gallivanting around Europe at the moment with his family, getting a much needed break. He will return next Friday with us. So all you loyal viewers who are missing Tim, he will be back tomorrow. Sorry, next week, not tomorrow. We're not doing 2 episodes this week. Don't worry. But thanks again, Robin. I appreciate you stopping by, and enjoy Maverick. We'll have to exchange our views once we both see it, and then we have you back on, and we can talk in depth about the pluses and minuses. Hopefully, there'll be more pluses than minuses. Obviously.
Oh, for sure.
All right. Thanks again, Robin.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you all next week.